Good morning dear student. Today we are discussing about the topic that is one of the neuroanatomy topic, that is the reticular formation. Reticular formation is one of the neurological structure forming the whole core of the brainstem. So learning objective of today's class are location, anatomical extension, connections, functional divisions, functions of the reticular formation, and clinical correlation. All these are the learning objectives of the reticular formation. All these are the learning objective of the reticular formation. So definition. Reticular formation is defined as diffuse ill-defined mass of intermingled neurons and nerve fiber occupying the entire core of the brainstem. So this one is the brainstem, medulla, pons, midbrain, and the whole core of it is formed by the reticular formation, and it is nothing but a diffuse mass of nerve fibers and intermingled neurons. Can you see here? This is the reticular formation and has got connection with every part of the neuroaxis. Every part of the neuroaxis. So it is a ill-defined mass of intermingled neurons and nerve fibers occupying the entire core of brainstem. So it is defined to include all areas within the brainstem except the named nuclei and the tracts, which when stimulated will produce arousal. So this core and along with the cervical part of the spinal cord, this is known as the reticular formation, present within the brainstem except the nuclei and tracts, which when stimulated will produce arousal. So these are the mass consisting of the reticular formation. So location of the reticular formation in the brainstem: cerebrum, corpus callosum, midbrain, pons, medulla, and here in the core there is a presence of the reticular formation. So this one is the reticular formation. Phylogenetically, it represents the old reticular core of the brain and contains within it the vital cardiac and respiratory centers, which control respiration, heart rate, and blood pressure. And in primitive vertebrates, the diffuse arrangement of neuron was named reticular. Diffuse formation or the diffuse arrangement of neuron was named reticular. So it is one of the old part of the evolutionary aspect of the human body, and it contains all the vital cardiac, respiratory centers, respiration, heart rate, and blood pressure, and it is a diffuse arrangement of the neurons was named the reticular. Reticular formation receives data from most of the sensory system, that means the ascending tracts, and has a efferent connection with all the levels of the neuroaxis. So the reticular formation receives data from most of the sensory systems and have efferent, that may be direct or indirect connections with all the levels of neuroaxis. Knowledge of reticular system is important because it regulates level of consciousness and alertness. It regulates respiration, blood pressure, heart rate, and other vegetative functions. It regulates tone of skeletal muscles, and it modulates the impulses in the pain pathways. So that's why the knowledge of the reticular system is important, as it regulates level of consciousness and alertness, regulate respiration, blood pressure, heart rate, and other vegetative functions, regulate tone of skeletal muscles, it modulates the impulses in the pain pathway. That's why the knowledge is very much important. Anatomical extension of the reticular formation. It extends from diencephalon cranially. Here is the thalamus, here is the lentiform nucleus, and here is the subthalamus. So from the diencephalon, that is the subthalamus, hypothalamus and thalamus, and caudally up to the spinal cord in the cervical region. Caudally to the spinal cord in the cervical region. So this is the actual or the projectional extent of the reticular formation. Whole this one is the extension of the actual or projectional extension of the reticular formation, anatomical extension. Some centers of the cerebrum and cerebellum are also related functionally to the reticular formation of the brainstem. There are few centers in the cerebrum and the cerebellum which may be related functionally to the reticular formation of the brainstem. It is consisting of network of nerve fibers and scattered neurons. Among them, a number of regions with fairly localized cell groups called reticular nuclei are also seen. Among them, a number of regions with fairly localized cell groups called reticular nuclei. So reticular nuclei are arranged into 3 columns, in 3 longitudinal columns in the core of the brainstem, and these are median nuclei, which are known as Raphe nuclei, medial nuclei just parallel to it, and lateral nuclei So reticular nuclei in the brainstem are arranged into 3 longitudinal columns. These are known as the reticular nuclei in the brainstem. Collection of nerve fiber, cell groups known as the nuclei in the brainstem. So these are the nuclei present within the core of the Raphe nuclei, medial group of nuclei and lateral group of nuclei according to the color code. Medial column lies in the midline and consists of intermediate sized neurons. And these nuclei are known as the Raphe nuclei. The medial column consists of such neurons which are large sized neurons. Hence this column is also termed magnocellular column. This is the magnocellular column, and here is the Raphe nuclei, and this one is the lateral column known as parvicellular column. As the cells are the small in size. So these are the 3 columns. Median column, which consists of intermediate sized neurons known as Raphe nuclei. This is the medial column, consists of nuclei which are large size known as the magnocellular column, and third parvicellular column, which is the lateral column present just lateral to these 2 columns. Parvicellular, small sized neurons are there. So medial and lateral column of nuclei. So lateral column contains small sized neurons, so these are known as parvicellular column. So medial column and the lateral column of nuclei which occupies the core of the brainstem. These are the reticular nuclei in the brainstem. Various reticular nuclei in the brainstem. Mesencephalic reticular nucleus, interstitial nucleus of Cajal, interpeduncular nucleus, red nucleus. This is a midbrain consisting of the reticular nuclei. This is the pons. Which are the nuclei in the pons? Oral and caudal pontine reticular nuclei. These are parvicellular nucleus of the pons. Third nucleus, reticulotegmental nucleus, and fourth one, paramedian nucleus. So these are the various reticular nuclei present within the pons. These are the nuclei present in the midbrain, and these are the nuclei present in the pons. This one is the medulla oblongata, and which are the nuclei there? Gigantocellular reticular nucleus, parvicellular nucleus, lateral reticular nucleus, and few smaller nuclei, parahypoglossal nuclei. parahypoglossal nuclei. So these are the reticular nuclei in the brainstem. These are the reticular nuclei in the brainstem. We have seen the nuclei present within the brainstem. That may be the median column of nuclei, medial nuclei. Median column is known as the raphe nuclei. Just lateral to it, medial column known as jejunum, and third one is the parvicellular column. Now we will discuss other parts of the. These are the sections. This is the midbrain, pons, medulla, and the cervical part are the part of the spinal cord. Here is the reticular formation present in the midbrain. Here is the reticular formation present in the pons. Large amount of reticular formation present in the medulla, and small amount of reticular formation present in the spinal cord. So these are the reticular formation in midbrain, reticular formation in pons, large amount of reticular formation in the medulla, and small amount of reticular formation in the spinal cord. Various levels of reticular formation in the brainstem and the spinal cord. Raphe nuclei, one by one, each nucleus we will discuss. First, raphe nuclei or the median group of nuclei. The raphe nuclei form a contiguous column in the midline. The neurons of the raphe nuclei produce serotonin, a substance that they use as a neurotransmitter. So the neurons of the raphe nuclei produce serotonin, a substance that they use as a neurotransmitter. Nuclei in the medial column. Number 1, dorsal raphe nucleus. This one is the dorsal raphe nucleus present in the midbrain, project to the spinal cord and forms a pain controlling pathway. So this is the dorsal raphe nucleus. Second, nucleus raphe magnus. This is the second nucleus in the medulla, project to the caudal part of spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve and influences perception of pain. Here the dorsal raphe nucleus consists of the pain controlling pathway. It influences perception of pain through spinal nucleus. So this one is the dorsal raphe nucleus, and in the medulla there is a nucleus raphe magnus, project to the caudal part of spinal nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. So here is the nucleus raphe magnus, second nucleus of the median column or the midline column of nuclei. Nucleus raphe magnus and dorsal raphe nucleus Medial group of nuclei. It consists of ventral reticular nucleus in the medulla, gigantocellular nucleus in the medulla and pons, and oral and pontine nuclei in the pons. So these are the median group of nuclei known as the magnocellular column. Large size neurons are there, and these are known as magnocellular column. Third group of nuclei. These are the nuclei. Various nuclei arranged in the various group. Few additional nuclei are also included in this column. Median group, blue one. This is the medial group, red one, and black one is the lateral group of nuclei. Additional few names are there, but main names I have told to you. Medial group of nuclei, their afferents and efferents. Connections. Nuclei of this group, that is the medial group of nuclei, receive, which are these? These are the nuclei. Number 1, ventral reticular nucleus, gigantocellular nucleus, and oral and caudal pontine nuclei. nuclei receive efferents from nuclei of lateral group and efferents from these nuclei ascend or descend longitudinally in the brainstem. The nuclei of this group receive efferents from the lateral group and efferents from this nuclei ascend or descend longitudinally in the brainstem. And it gives collateral to the other reticular cells and thus forming a polysynaptic pathway, a characteristic of impulse transmission through the reticular formation. So these are the connections of the medial group of nuclei. Nuclei of this group receive efferents from lateral group, and efferents from these nuclei ascend or descend in the brainstem and give collateral to the reticular cells, thus forming a polysynaptic pathway. So important is it receives efferents from lateral group of nuclei and efferents may ascend or descend in the brainstem and give collateral to the reticular cells, thus forming a polysynaptic pathway, a characteristic of impulse transmission through the reticular formation. So that are the connections of the medial group of nuclei. Now the lateral group of nuclei. These nuclei includes parvicellular column present in the medulla and pons, locus coeruleus nucleus in the pons, and pedunculopontine nucleus of the midbrain. Midbrain. So these are lateral group of nuclei. These nuclei, again connections of this nuclei, receive collaterals from several ascending pathway. Important thing is ascending tracts that give collateral to these nuclei and project to the medial group of nuclei of the reticular formation. They are regarded as an association region of the reticular formation. So that are the lateral group of nuclei. Now the connections of the reticular formation. So already we have seen nuclei of the various parts of the reticular formation, medial group of nucleus, to the medial column, that is the medial column, and from there the fiber may ascend or descend in the brainstem, and likewise that of the of the reticular nuclei occupy the every part of the central nervous system. So we will discuss the connections. It receives information from almost all the principal parts of the nervous system and in turn project to all these parts. The reticular formation receives information from almost all the principal parts of the nervous system, and in turn project directly or indirectly to all these parts. The reticular pathways are polysynaptic, both ascending, descending, crossed and uncrossed. So the reticular pathways are polysynaptic, both ascending, descending, crossed and uncrossed. As a result, a unilateral stimulation produces bilateral responses. If there is unilateral stimulation, produces bilateral response. Now the afferent connections of the reticular formation. These are divided into three groups. Afferents from various sensory pathways or systems, afferent fiber from other parts of the central nervous system, other factors influencing the activity of reticular formation. So these are the three groups of the afferent connections. From sensory pathways, number one, from the other parts of central nervous system, second part, and third, other factors influencing the activity of the reticular formation. Now first group of afferent connections, receiving connections, afferents from various sensory pathways, optic system through tectoreticular fiber, olfactory and limbic system through variety of descending pathways, auditory system through tectoreticular fiber, gustatory, that is the taste pathway, spinal pathway through spino-reticular fiber, which are these? Optic system, olfactory and limbic system through variety of descending pathways, auditory system through tectoreticular fiber, gustatory system, spinal pathways through spino-reticular fiber. So these are the afferent connection. Few other are also there. A considerable number of fibers of spinothalamic tract terminate in the lateral reticular nucleus of medulla, which in turn project to the cerebellum. So spinothalamic tract terminate in the lateral reticular nucleus of medulla, and which in turn project to the cerebellum. Spino-reticulocerebellar pathway is an important pathway for carrying exteroceptive sensations to the cerebellum. And trigeminal pathway. So these are the afferents of the reticular formation of the first group, consisting of the ascending fiber. Spino-reticulocerebellar pathway and trigeminal pathway. This is the number one afferent. Number two afferent fiber from other parts of central nervous system. Afferent fiber from other parts of central nervous system. Number one, cerebellum, from both, but mainly from contralateral fastigial nucleus. Basal ganglia, mainly from corpus striatum. Thalamus, hypothalamus and subthalamus. Limbic system, mainly from septal areas, amygdala nucleus and hippocampus. Cerebral cortex, mainly from motor and sensory areas of the cerebral cortex. Red nucleus, these are second variety of afferent fiber. Red nucleus, substantia nigra and reticular nuclei. Red nucleus, substantia nigra and habenular nuclei. These are the second variety of afferent fiber from other parts of central nervous system. So this is a diagram to show you the connections of the reticular formation. These are the various ascending pathways giving fiber to the lateral part of the reticular nuclei. From here the fibers are projected to the thalamus, that is the reticular nuclei of the thalamus, and from the thalamus these are projected into the cerebral hemisphere, that are known as these are the ascending group of afferents fiber. Few fibers are coming from the cerebellum also and going directly to spino-reticulocerebellar pathway. So this one is the cerebellum. Second variety are the efferents. These are the descending fiber coming from the cerebral cortex, giving collateral nuclei to the cranial nerve nuclei, spino-reticular fiber, corticospinal fiber and the reticulospinal tract or the fiber. These are the efferents of the reticular formation, and these are the afferents. All these are the afferents of the cerebellar reticular formation, and these fibers from the lateral nuclei which are projected to the thalamus, reticular nuclei of the thalamus, and from the reticular nuclei of thalamus to the cerebral cortex. These are known as ascending reticular activating system. These are the connections of the afferent and efferent both are shown in this diagram, but mainly we have to concentrate just now on the afferent of the reticular formation and the ascending reticular activating system Third variety of afferents of the reticular formation are the hormones and the chemical substances, that is adrenaline, acetylcholine and carbon dioxide. Adrenaline, acetylcholine and the carbon dioxide. Drugs like barbiturates, anesthetics and tranquilizers are also one of the factors influencing the activity of the reticular formation and come under the variety of the efferents of the reticular formation. So efferents of the reticular are divided into three groups. Number is central nervous system, and third are the activity other factors influencing the activity of the reticular. These are reticular formation, efferents of the reticular formation. Now efferents of the reticular efferents first in this schematic diagram. These are cerebral cortex, number 1. Number 2, thalamus, hypothalamus and subthalamus. These are the efferents, important major efferents. Major efferents are from the limbic system, including septal areas, amygdaloid complex and hippocampus. Cerebellum from the spino-reticular path, collateral from ascending tracts, collateral from cranial nerves, including vestibular and the cochlear nerves, and the corpus striatum So these are the major efferents of the reticular formation. Cerebral cortex, thalamus, hypothalamus, subthalamus, limbic system, including septal areas, amygdaloid complex, hippocampus, cerebellum, spinal cord, collateral from the ascending tracts, collateral from the cranial nerves, vestibular and the cochlear nerves, and corpus striatum. Efferent connections of the reticular formation. Efferent connection, that is the going away pathway of the reticular formation. The efferent connections of the reticular formation are to all the parts of CNS from which it receives efferent, but mainly to all the parts of CNS except but few of them: autonomic and locomotor control center of the brainstem and spinal cord, cranial nerve nuclei, example dorsal nucleus of the vagus, cerebral cortex indirectly through diencephalic nuclei, red nucleus of the midbrain, substantia nigra of the midbrain, tectum means superior colliculus of the midbrain, inferior colliculus of the midbrain. So autonomic and locomotor control centers of the brainstem and the spinal cord. Cranial nerve nuclei, example the dorsal nucleus of vagus. The cerebral cortex indirectly through the diencephalic nuclei. Red nucleus, substantia nigra and tectum of the midbrain. These are the few main efferents of the reticular formation. These are thalamus, hypothalamus, subthalamus. These are one of the efferents. Red nucleus, substantia nigra and the tectum. These are about the midbrain. Cerebellum, autonomic center in the brainstem, autonomic center and interneurons of the spinal cord, and the olivary nuclei. So these are the major efferents of the reticular formation. So these are the afferents and efferent in one diagram. We can see all the afferents and the efferent. Number 1, cerebral cortex. So this one is the cerebral cortex. Efferent coming from thalamus and the hypothalamus. Number 2. Number 3, olfactory and the limbic system. Number 4, from the optic system. Number 5, from the collateral from the cranial nerve. Number 6 from the, that is the cerebellum with reticular formation. Number 7 collateral from the ascending pathway. Collateral from the ascending pathway. This is number 7, collateral from the ascending pathway. Number 8, these are the again afferent spino-reticular. This is the 8th one. This is the spino-reticular pathway. This is the spino-reticular pathway. And efferents are the red colored ones. Red colored one are the efferents, and these are from the going out from the that is the reticular formation. Number 9, that is the corticospinal tract. Number 10, the reticulospinal tract. Number 11, to the cerebellum. Number 12 to the cranial nerve nuclei. Here is the 12 cranial nerve nuclei. And number 13, this one, which is nothing but the ascending reticular activating system, which is nothing but the ascending reticular activating system, one of the part of the ARAS, which is also known as ARAS, ascending reticular activating system, that is known as ARAS. So that these are the afferents and efferent in the one diagram of the reticular formation. Afferent and efferent, about 13 are in number. So this is a diagram, very good diagram to explain all the afferent and efferents of the reticular formation. Afferent and efferents of the reticular formation. Few new researches have shown the chemoarchitectonic organization of the reticular formation. These modern techniques have defined the reticular formation as consisting of a well-defined group of nerve cells. These are a well-defined group of nerve cells with specific neurotransmitters. These are serotonergic nuclei, cholinergic nuclei, catecholaminergic nuclei. These are non-adrenergic and adrenergic neurons, and dopaminergic neurons. These are according to the basis of the neurotransmitters. These are divided into following four groups. Serotonergic nuclei, cholinergic nuclei, catecholaminergic nuclei, and dopaminergic nuclei, while catecholaminergic nuclei are again divided into non-adrenergic nuclei and adrenergic nuclei. Now the functional divisions of the reticular formation. Functionally, the reticular formation is divided into two systems. These are ascending reticular activating system and descending reticular activating system. The ascending reticular activating system is commonly termed as the reticular activating system. First, the ascending reticular activating system. We will discuss about that. Most of the ascending tract, that is the spinothalamic tract, trigeminal lemniscus, lateral lemniscus, that is the spinothalamic tract, and the central vestibular pathway, while passing through the brainstem, give collateral to the lateral part of reticular formation, which project to the intralaminar and reticular nuclei of the thalamus. And these in reticular nuclei of thalamus project to the cerebral cortex. These nuclei in turn project to the widespread areas of the cerebral cortex. And when this part of reticular formation is stimulated, the individual becomes alert. Hence it is termed as the ascending reticular activating system. What are the things? These are the ascending tracts, give collateral to the lateral part of reticular formation, which project to intralaminar and reticular nuclei of the thalamus, in turn project to the widespread areas of the cerebral cortex. When this part of reticular formation is stimulated, the individual becomes alert. Hence it is known as the ascending reticular activating system. These are the diagrams from the here. Ascending fiber, that is the ascending tract, run from the medulla From the medulla it goes into the intraamiral, give collateral to the lateral nucleus of the reticular formation. These are projected to the intralaminar thalamic nuclei of the intralaminar and the reticular nuclei of the thalamus, and from there these are projected to the, and these systems are believed to be responsible for maintaining a state of alertness and consciousness. Is believed to be responsible for maintaining a state of alertness and the consciousness. So these are the ascending reticular activating. This is a diagram. These are the ascending pathway, blue colored, give collateral. These are the collateral to the lateral nucleus of the brainstem, that are the reticular nuclei. From here the fiber are projected to the intralaminar and the reticular nuclei of the thalamus, and from here the thalamus, the fibers are projected to the cerebral cortex. And the fibers are projected to the cerebral cortex, and these are known as ascending reticular activating system. These are known as ascending reticular activating system. Whole this blue color is the ascending reticular activating system. Ascending pathway to the collateral to the lateral nuclei. From the lateral nuclei the fibers are projected to the intralaminar and the reticular nuclei of the thalamus, and from the intralaminar nuclei and reticular nuclei the fiber are projected to the cerebral cortex. So here is the ascending reticular activating system and giving fibers to the cerebral cortex. Now the descending reticular system. It consists of descending pathways from the reticular formation to the autonomic center in the brainstem, and lateral and anterior horn cells in the spinal cord. It consists of descending pathways from reticular formation to the autonomic center in the brainstem and the lateral and anterior horn cells in the spinal cord. It consists of two parts: descending inhibitory reticular projection and descending facilitatory reticular projection, or the descending inhibitory reticular system or descending facilitatory reticular system. So these are the excitatory areas and these are the inhibitory areas, or the descending reticular activating system. Functions of the inhibitory system are the smoothness and accuracy of the voluntary movements, reflex movements, regulates muscle tone, maintenance of posture, control vegetative functions. These are the inhibitory descending pathway functions. Facilitatory functions are the maintains muscle tone, facilitates autonomic function, and activate ascending reticular activating system. So which are the main important parts of the descending reticular activating systems are the lateral reticulospinal tract and the medial reticulospinal tract. The lateral reticulospinal tract lies in the lateral part of white column. Here is the lateral reticulospinal tract. Where does it lie? It lies in the lateral white column. Its fiber arise in the reticular formation from the brainstem. From the brainstem, this is the midbrain, pons, medulla, and here the fibers are coming downward and relay in the anterior horn cells. These tracts exert facilitatory influence on the motor neurons which supply the skeletal muscle. So where does it lie? It lies in the lateral white column. The fiber arise from the cells of reticular formation in the brainstem, midbrain, pons and medulla, and relay in the anterior horn cells. These tracts exert facilitatory influence on the motor neurons which supply the skeletal muscle. These are the one of the component of the descending reticular activating system. This is again the two tracts. This is the lateral reticulospinal tract, and here is the medial reticulospinal tract. This brown colored is the median reticulospinal tract, one of the component of the descending reticular pathway. The medial reticulospinal tract lies in the anterior white column. Here is the anterior white column. Here is the lateral white column. The fiber arises from the reticular formation of the medulla. The fiber arises from here, relay in the anterior horn cells of spinal cord. Here is the relay of the medial reticulospinal tract. This tract exert inhibitory influence on the motor neurons, supplying the skeletal muscle. So these are the medial reticulospinal tract. Lies in the anterior white column. The reticulospinal fibers are now thought to include the descending autonomic fiber. These are the nothing but the descending autonomic fiber. The reticulospinal tract thus provide a pathway by which the hypothalamus can control the thoracolumbar sympathetic outflow and the sacral parasympathetic outflow. So the reticulospinal tracts thus provide a pathway by which the hypothalamus can control the thoracolumbar sympathetic outflow and the sacral parasympathetic outflow. Functions of the reticular formation: maintains the normal state of consciousness or wakefulness. How? Through its connections with the cerebral cortex by way of ascending reticular activating system. These are the functions, one of the function of the reticular formation. Second, regulate respiration, heart rate, blood pressure and other vegetative function through autonomic reflex center present in the brainstem. Controls muscular activity directly through reticulospinal projections to lower motor neurons and indirectly by influencing the activities of the cerebellum, red nucleus, substantia nigra, corpus tritum and the cerebral cortex. So control muscular activity through reticulospinal projections to the lower motor neurons and indirectly influencing the activities of which are the things responsible for the muscular activity: cerebellum, red nucleus, substantia nigra, corpus tritum and the cerebral cortex. Control receptivity of the sensory end organs. Control threshold of the central sensory pathways. Regulate endocrine, visceral and emotional functions through its connections with hypothalamus and the limbic lobe. Regulates endocrine, visceral, emotional functions through its connections with hypothalamus and limbic lobe. The reticular formation constitutes one of the important regulatory mechanisms within the CNS. Clinical correlation, that is the applied importance of the reticular activating system. Damage of the reticular activating system in the core of brainstem. Leads to progressive loss of consciousness followed by coma and death. Electrical stimulation of either the dorsal raphe nucleus, that is periaqueductal grey matter, or nucleus raphe magnus, these are midline nuclei, results in loss of ability to experience pain from sites of injury and disease. The visual and acoustic stimuli can stimulate reticular activating system to maintain alertness and attention, and removal of visual and auditory stimuli may lead to drowsiness and sleep. Functions of reticular activating system can be affected by certain drugs. For example, general anesthetics and tranquilizers cause its suppression. On the other hand, ammonia and other irritants stimulate it. A coma is a state of unconsciousness due to inactivity of the reticular activating system. In coma, even the most powerful external stimuli cannot cause arousal. Descending fibers from reticular formation. Constitute one of the most important motor pathways. The fibers for reticular formation to the autonomic center in the brainstem are critical in controlling respiratory and cardiac rhythms and other functions. So we have seen about the anatomical extension of the reticular formations, various nuclei of the reticular formations, efferents with the flow chart, and along with that there is the descending pathway reticular formation. RAS, that is the ascending reticular activating system, and second one descending reticular activating system. Thank you.